I work at a night gas station tucked away in the woods, just a few hundred meters from town. It's not the kind of place that gets a lot of traffic after dark. Most nights are slow, uneventful. A few cars pulling in for gas or a quick snack. The drivers barely acknowledging me behind the counter. To be honest, I was always a little uneasy about working there. Being out in the woods alone at night had a way of getting under your skin, especially when the darkness outside seemed to swallow the station whole. I'd hear rustling in the bushes sometimes, see the occasional fox or deer emerge from the shadows of the forest. Once, I even saw a wolf, big, with glowing eyes that locked onto mine before it disappeared back into the trees. After a while, though, I got used to it. Every night started to feel the same, quiet, still, just the soft hum of the coolers and the distant whisper of wind through the trees. But this night was different. It started as just a strange feeling, creeping up the back of my neck like a cold finger. I couldn't put my finger on it, but something felt off, uncomfortable, like I was being watched, even though I knew I was alone. It didn't make sense, but the sensation kept nagging at me, pulling at the corners of my mind as the hours ticked by. At some point, I must have dozed off in my chair behind the counter. It happens especially on slow nights like this. But when I woke up, it was to the sound of a car pulling up to the pump. A man stepped out, his face mostly hidden under the brim of a baseball cap. He walked inside, grabbed a bag of chips, and paid in cash without a word. Just as quickly as he came, he was gone again, disappearing into the night as the roar of his engine faded into the distance. But after that, sleep wouldn't come back. The uneasy feeling from earlier had grown stronger, tightening around my chest like a vice. Something was wrong. I tried to shake it off, telling myself I was just tired, that working alone at night in the woods would make anyone jumpy. Still, I couldn't ignore the prickling sensation that someone or something was watching me. I glanced out the window toward the woods, squinting into the darkness. At first I saw nothing, just the thick line of trees, their branches swaying in the breeze. But then, out of the corner of my eye, I caught a glimpse of something, a figure standing just at the edge of the forest. It looked like a man, but I couldn't be sure. The shadows clung to him, making it hard to tell if he was really there or if my mind was playing tricks on me. My pulse quickened. What would a person be doing out in the woods this late at night? I blinked, and just like that, the figure was gone. I tried to convince myself it was nothing, just my tired brain conjuring images out of the darkness. But no matter how hard I tried, the feeling of being watched wouldn't go away. My eyelids grew heavy, and before I knew it, I was drifting off again. The next thing I remember was the sound of a knock. It was soft at first, barely more than a tap against the glass. My eyes snapped open, and I turned toward the window. There, standing just outside, was a man. No, not just a man. His face was wrong. It was covered in deep, jagged wounds, the kind that looked like they hadn't healed right. His skin was pale, almost gray under the harsh fluorescent lights of the gas station. But it was his eyes that chilled me the most. They were wide, unblinking, and fixed directly on me. He smiled, a slow, terrifying grin that sent ice-cold shivers down my spine. I jumped to my feet, heart hammering in my chest. My first instinct was to lock the door, but as I moved, he raised his hand and tapped on the glass again, like he was toying with me. Then he spoke, his voice low and rasping, like nails on a chalkboard.
"Who did you see out there in the woods?"
he asked, his smile never faltering. I froze. Goosebumps prickled my arms as dread clawed its way up my throat. What do you want?" I managed to ask, my voice barely more than a whisper. He just laughed, a high, unsettling sound that echoed in the stillness of the night. Then, without warning, he slammed his forehead against the glass with a sickening thud. The impact was so hard, I could see the glass starting to crack. Panic set in. I bolted from the counter, running toward the back of the store, my mind racing. I had to hide, had to get away from him before he broke through. I could hear him behind me, banging his head against the glass again and again, the cracks spreading like spider webs. I made it to the bathroom, locking the door behind me and pressing myself against it, my chest heaving. The sound of breaking glass reached my ears, and my blood ran cold. He was inside. I fumbled for my phone, hands shaking as I dialed 911. The operator's voice was distant, almost unreal as I stammered out my location, telling them someone had broken in. I could hear the man moving through the store, his footsteps heavy and deliberate as he searched for me. And then, he stopped, right outside the bathroom door. The handle jiggled and my heart nearly stopped. Then came the banging, hard, rhythmic, like he was trying to break the door down. I pressed myself harder against the door, tears stinging my eyes as I listened to him try to get in. Suddenly, the wail of sirens pierced the night air. They were close, too close for him to ignore. He must have heard them too, because the banging stopped. I held my breath, straining to hear what he would do next. For what felt like an eternity, there was nothing but silence. Then I heard the sound of running footsteps, fading into the distance. I stayed locked in that bathroom until I heard the sound of voices, real voices, outside the door. The police had arrived. Slowly, shakily, I opened the door and stepped out into the store. The front window was shattered, glass littering the floor, and outside, 2 officers were leading the man away in handcuffs. He was still smiling, even as they shoved him into the back of the patrol car. One of the officers approached me, his expression calm but serious. "You're lucky," he said. "We've been looking for this guy for weeks. He's wanted for 2 murders just outside of town." My stomach dropped. "A serial killer," the officer continued, "and it looks like you were next on his list." I nodded numbly, my legs feeling like they might give out beneath me. The officer put a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "You're safe now," he said. "There's nothing to be afraid of." But even as I watched the police car drive away, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone or something was still out there, watching from the darkness of the woods.